The sensorium screamed red. Prylorian colony Zeta-9 was about to become slag, their defenses already collapsing under the Cathar onslaught. A desperate, automated SOS beacon was the only thing standing between them and oblivion. Or so they thought, until it echoed across the void, a signal only one species would answer. Cities that once gleamed with crystalline towers now burned like funeral pyres, their light reflecting off the rapidly failing planetary shields. Panic choked the comms channels as Prylorian citizens, a species renowned for their peaceful nature and technological prowess, scrambled for non-existent escape routes. The Cathar, a relentless tide of chitin and fury, hammered at the defenses, their warships spitting emerald fire that vaporized everything it touched. From the surface, designated Hope's last stand, the automated SOS beacon pulsed with desperate energy. Its message, a complex weave of data and pleas, broadcast on all frequencies, but with a specific emphasis on a rarely used band, almost forgotten in the galactic noise. The signal carried the weight of a dying civilization, a final, desperate gamble that someone, somewhere, was listening. It painted a grim picture. The Prylorians, architects of shimmering cities and masters of energy manipulation, were being systematically crushed by the Cathar, a warlike empire whose sole purpose was conquest. The message ended with a single, haunting phrase: "When all hope is lost, only the Deathworlders remain." Light years away, on a remote Terran Alliance monitoring station orbiting a forgotten gas giant, Robert Wright stared blankly at his lukewarm synthetic coffee. Flashing red alerts blinked insistently on his console, a symphony of digital desperation he'd long learned to ignore. Planetary squabbles, pirate raids, the occasional rogue asteroid, it all blurred into a monotonous drone. He took another sip of the sludge, the artificial flavor doing little to cut through the bitterness that had settled deep in his soul. A sudden, jarring klaxon cut through his apathy. A priority override, designated Crimson Omega, blared across his console, forcing him to acknowledge the incoming SOS. Crimson Omega was reserved for extinction-level events, signals so dire they bypassed all standard protocols. He swore under his breath. What now? His fingers, calloused from years of neglect, hovered over the controls. A fleeting image flashed through his mind. A younger version of himself, face illuminated by a similar console, receiving news that his family's transport ship had been caught in a crossfire during a frontier war. No survivors. He pushed the memory down, a familiar ache in his chest. Grudgingly, Robert rerouted the SOS through multiple decryption layers, each one peeling back layers of alien code and desperation. The Prylorian plea was raw, unfiltered, a desperate cry for salvation. He saw the schematics of their energy weapons, hopelessly outmatched by the Cathar's brute force. He heard the screams of the dying, digitized and compressed, but no less haunting. For the first time in years, something stirred within him, a flicker of long-dormant empathy. Suddenly, the station's comms system erupted. A cacophony of incoming signals flooded the channels, each one vying for attention, each one responding to the Zeta-9 SOS. The alerts multiplied, a blinding storm of light and sound. Robert stared at his console in disbelief. What was going on? Long-range sensors painted a picture that defied logic. Ships were appearing out of warp space, dozens, then hundreds, an entire fleet of mixed-species vessels converging on Zeta-9's location. They were unlike anything he'd ever seen, a bizarre collection of warships and modified transports, each bearing the scars of countless battles. A unified comms channel opened, and a chorus of voices, each speaking a different language, filled the station. Then a single dominant voice cut through the chaos, its tone rough and commanding. "This is High Commander Torvin of the Krog Hegemony," the voice boomed. "To the defenders of Zeta-9, we have heard your call. To the Cathar scum, you have made a grave error." The Deathworlder coalition had arrived. Robert watched in stunned silence as the Deathworlder fleet engaged the Cathar forces. Their tactics were unconventional, to say the least. Krog battleships filled with oversized cannons unleashed barrages of plasma fire. Sylphid fighters, nimble and swift, danced through the Cathar formations, disrupting their attack runs. Varathian cruisers, heavily armored and dripping with energy shields, absorbed the brunt of the Cathar assault, allowing the smaller vessels to maneuver. It was a chaotic, brutal ballet of death, and the Cathar were clearly caught off guard. The tide of the battle was turning. Witnessing the Deathworlder's ferocity, Robert felt a strange mix of awe and unease. He, a Terran Alliance comms officer, was watching a coalition of species, each more terrifying than the last, descend upon a battlefield to defend a colony they'd never even heard of before today. Was this what redemption looked like? Could he, too, find a way to fight back against the darkness that had consumed him? Meanwhile, orbiting the dying planet, the Prylorian science vessel Hope limped through the debris field. Severely damaged and crippled by the initial Cathar assault, it was a ghost ship, its crew decimated, its systems failing. Inside, a young Prylorian scientist named Vega worked frantically at a damaged comms console, sparks flying around her as she bypassed fried circuits. Her face was smudged with soot, her arm bleeding from a shrapnel wound, but her eyes burned with fierce drive. She had to reach them. She had to warn the Deathworlder fleet about the Cathar's true objective before it was too late. She was the Hope's, and perhaps the galaxy's, only chance. The lights flickered erratically aboard the Hope, casting long, dancing shadows across the cramped science vessel. A low groan resonated through the hull as Vega, her face streaked with grime and a fresh gash bleeding on her forehead, wrestled with the damaged comms array. Sparks showered around her as she bypassed a fried power regulator, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Life support was already operating on emergency reserves. Rerouting any more power was a gamble, one that could suffocate them all. But the colony needed a warning. With a final surge, the comms array sputtered to life, bathing the small compartment in an unsteady blue glow. Vega, ignoring the throbbing in her head, initiated the emergency broadcast. Cathar. Energy weapons. Modulated frequency. Vulnerable. Shields. The message, fragmented and weak, pulsed into the void, a desperate plea carried on a thread of hope aimed at the Deathworlder fleet. Another Cathar salvo slammed into the Hope, the vessel bucking violently. Vega was thrown from her station, slamming headfirst into a console. Pain exploded behind her eyes, and darkness threatened to engulf her. Across the void, aboard the Terran Alliance monitoring station, Robert Wright watched the unfolding chaos on the main screen. The Deathworlder ships were a kaleidoscope of alien designs and combat doctrines. The Krog battleships, hulking mountains of metal, traded brutal broadsides with the Cathar cruisers, their energy cannons ripping through shields with raw, untamed power. In stark contrast, the Sylvan frigates, sleek and agile, danced through the battlefield, their disruptor beams slicing through enemy fighters with surgical precision. He muttered, brute force and finesse. Quite the combination. He paused, noticing a disturbing pattern. The Cathar weren't targeting the Deathworlder warships directly. Instead, they were systematically dismantling Zeta-9's infrastructure. Power grids buckled, communication arrays fell silent, and civilian sectors erupted in flames. Damn it, Robert swore, pushing away from his console. They're not just conquering, they're crippling the planet. Robert rerouted every available watt of power to the station's sensor array. The holographic display shimmered, resolution sharpening, revealing the Cathar strategy with chilling clarity. They were surgically dismantling Zeta-9's ability to resist, leaving it vulnerable to something else. On board the Krog flagship Skullcrusher, High Commander Torvin, a towering figure clad in scarred battle armor, roared into the comms. All ships, Focus fire on Cathar capital vessels. Target their shield generators. The Prylorian whelp gave us the key. Let's use it. The Deathworlder fleet unleashed a coordinated assault, exploiting the vulnerability Vega had identified. Cathar shields flickered and died, their capital ships becoming vulnerable to the Krog's devastating firepower. But as the Cathar warships buckled, they unleashed a swarm of hunter-killer drones, small, agile machines designed to overwhelm point defense systems. Back on the Terran Alliance monitoring station, a blaring alarm ripped through the silence. Robert stared at the incoming data stream, his gut twisting with dread. Encrypted communication, high-level Cathar command, secondary objective, beyond planetary conquest. He pounded his fist on the console. The station's decryption algorithms were pitifully outdated, decades behind current Cathar encryption methods. He ran diagnostic after diagnostic, each one returning the same frustrating result: insufficient processing power, outdated software. Swallowing his pride, Robert activated the comms. "This is Terran Alliance Monitoring Station Zulu 9 to Deathworlder Fleet Command. I have intercepted a heavily encrypted Cathar communication, requesting assistance with decryption. My station lacks the necessary algorithms." He hesitated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Admitting weakness wasn't exactly in the Terran Alliance handbook. A soft, melodic voice responded, "Terran Station, this is Sylvan Decryption Specialist, designated Whisper. We can assist. Be warned, however, Cathar encryption often includes data corruption protocols. Proceed with extreme caution. And Terran, should we be successful, I may require a small favor." Aboard the Hope, Vega groaned, pushing herself up from the floor. The world swam back into focus, blurry and distorted. She reached for the emergency beacon, her fingers brushing against shattered plastic and severed wires. The beacon was a mangled mess, its signal weak and intermittent, barely a whisper in the vastness of space. Pinpointing their exact location for rescue would be nearly impossible. With a surge of adrenaline, Vega spotted a damaged medical scanner across the room. Ignoring the pounding in her head, she crawled towards it, her mind already racing, formulating a plan. If she could just. Meanwhile, the Deathworlder fleet had pushed the Cathar forces back into orbit, securing Zeta 9's capital city. Celebratory messages flooded the comms channels, a brief moment of respite in the chaos. Back on the monitoring station, Robert received the decryption algorithm from Whisper. A shiver ran down his spine as he examined the code. It was elegant, efficient, and subtly unsettling. "Sylvan ingenuity," he muttered, "or something else entirely." He initiated the decryption sequence, his fingers hovering over the abort button, the algorithm word to life, tearing through the Cathar encryption easily. Fragments of the message began to coalesce, painting a terrifying picture. Seismic charges, deep beneath surface. Zeta 9 core, detonation sequence. Before Robert could fully process the information, a new alarm blared. He stared in disbelief as a wave of specialized stealth fighters, invisible to conventional sensors, bypassed the Deathworlder fleet and plunged towards Zeta 9. The seismic charges were nestled deep within 3 of Zeta 9's most active geothermal vents. He pinpointed the coordinates on the star chart, the red markers pulsing like angry wounds on the planet's surface. Robert hit his fist on the console. Damn it! He scrambled to patch a channel to planetary defense, but as he typed, a wave of static washed over his console. The Sylvan decryption algorithm, still running in the background, was beginning to destabilize his station's systems. Error messages cascaded across his screens, a digital plague infecting every subroutine. Come on, Robert muttered, frantically rerouting power and purging corrupted files. The station lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the cramped space. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he fought to maintain control, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He had to get those coordinates out. Meanwhile, on the Hope, Vega coughed, the metallic tang of blood filling her mouth. Despite the searing pain in her side, she tightened her grip on the plasma torch. The hull breach, a jagged tear ripped open by Cathar fire, hissed with escaping atmosphere. Dizziness threatened to overwhelm her, but she pressed on, welding a makeshift patch onto the hull. Molten metal sprayed around her, illuminating her gritted teeth and determined eyes. Each spark was a tiny victory against the encroaching darkness. Finally, with a hiss of cooling metal, the patch held. The immediate danger was contained but not averted. Weak but resolute, Vega stumbled back to the emergency beacon, her hand trembling as she reactivated it. This is Vega Tyrell of the Prylorian vessel Hope, she gasped, her voice raspy. We are still under attack. Seismic charges detected near geothermal vents. Request immediate assistance. Repeat, immediate assistance. She sent the signal, hoping it would reach the Deathworlder fleet before the Cathar found her. In the void above Zeta 9, the Deathworlder fleet responded. Ships peeled off from the main formation, splitting into squadrons. Krog destroyers, overflowing with heavy plasma cannons, lumbered toward the remaining Cathar capital ships. Sleek Sylvan cruisers, shimmering with cloaking fields, hunted the stealth fighters. A Krog destroyer, the Skullcrusher, intercepted a flight of 3 Cathar stealth fighters. The Krog captain, a hulking brute named Vorlag, bellowed orders in his guttural tongue. Open fire. Turn those tin cans into slag. The Skullcrusher's plasma cannons roared, unleashing a barrage of emerald energy. 2 of the fighters exploded in brilliant flashes, but the third, piloted by a cunning Cathar ace, slipped through the barrage and vanished into the planet's atmosphere. Elsewhere, a Sylvan cruiser, the Shadow Walker, used its advanced cloaking technology to ambush another group of stealth fighters. Captain Lyra, her voice a cool whisper, activated the ship's EMP cannons. Precise bursts only. We need to disable, not destroy. The Shadow Walker unleashed a series of focused EMP bursts, frying the fighters' systems and leaving them drifting helplessly in space. Back on Zeta 9, the planetary seismic sensors registered a series of unusual energy signatures near the geothermal vents. General Aris, his face grim, studied the data. Seismic charges confirmed, he announced, his voice echoing through the command center. They're going to trigger a chain reaction. Evacuate coastal cities closest to the vents. Now. Robert, his station on the verge of collapse, finally managed to isolate the seismic charge locations. With a surge of adrenaline, he forced a transmission through to General Aris's command center just as his systems died completely, plunging him into darkness. Aris, receiving the critical data, barked orders into his comm. Mobilize teams to the geothermal vents. We're going to hit them before they can arm those charges. The evacuation sirens wailed across the coastal cities, a mournful cry against the backdrop of the ongoing battle. On the Hope, Vega heard the telltale whine of approaching Cathar fighters. They had found her. Her breath hitched in her throat, but she refused to surrender. Scrabbling through the wreckage, she found a discarded plasma cutter, its power cell still partially charged. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She gripped the weapon tightly, her squeezing hard. Just then, a new voice crackled over the comms. Unidentified vessel, this is the Terran Alliance frigate Stalwart, Captain Eva Rostova commanding. We are responding to your distress signal. Stand by for assistance. The Stalwart changed course, its powerful engine screaming as it raced to intercept the Cathar fighters closing in on the Hope. Rostova, her face etched with willpower, addressed her crew. Prepare a boarding party. We're going in hot. Let's show these Cathar what happens when they mess with those under our protection. The boarding party, a mix of Terran Marines and heavily armed Krog berserkers, scrambled to their positions, their weapons charged and ready. Meanwhile, in the darkness of his ruined station, Robert fought to reboot his systems. As the power flickered back to life, he noticed something strange. The Sylvan algorithm, despite its destructive effects, had opened a hidden communication channel, a backdoor he hadn't authorized. A single line of text pulsed on the screen, initiating connection. Then, a voice, cold and ethereal, filled his mind. "Greetings, Terran, I am Whisper. Thank you for your unwitting assistance." Robert stared at the screen, his heart pounding in his chest. "Who are you? What was that algorithm supposed to do?" "It transmitted a counter signal," Whisper replied, her voice devoid of emotion. "A key to unlock certain potential." "Potential for what?" Robert demanded, but Whisper ignored his question. "Verify that the signal was delivered. A code is embedded in your core system memory. Retrieve it for me." Robert hesitated, his mind blown. He was now complicit in whatever Whisper was planning, but curiosity and a growing sense of dread compelled him forward. He typed in the command to access the core memory, his fingers trembling. As the code appeared on the screen, a chilling realization washed over him. Whisper wasn't Prylorian, and she definitely wasn't Deathworlder. The code swam before Robert's eyes, a kaleidoscope of corrupted Prylorian characters and fragmented machine language. Each line was a garbled mess, a testament to the Cathar's brutal efficiency in dismantling Zeta-9 systems. He squinted, forcing his mind to filter the noise, searching for the anomaly, the embedded counter-signal. The stale, recycled air of the Hope tasted like metal and desperation. A ripple ran through his console, a barely perceptible flicker in the ambient light. Robert frowned, pausing his decryption sequence. He reran the diagnostics on his station, the results coming back clean. But something felt wrong, a prickling sensation at the back of his neck. He initiated a deep scan, bypassing the standard protocols, pushing the system to its limits. A faint signature emerged, buried deep within the core system memory, a remote access thread. Someone or something was watching him. "Hurry, Robert," Whisper's voice hissed in his ear, a digitized whisper that sent a shiver down his spine. "The Cathar will soon realize the counter-signal is more than just noise. They will trace its origin." Meanwhile, deeper within the Hope, Vega worked with a frantic energy. Sparks flew as she spliced together severed power conduits, rerouting energy to her makeshift traps. Coolant lines, ruptured by the Cathar assault, snaked across the floor, forming icy puddles. Using scavenged components and sheer ingenuity, she was creating a maze of hazards, a gauntlet for any Cathar foolish enough to pursue her. Two Cathar fighters, sleek and predatory, screamed into the Hope's cavernous hangar bay, their weapons armed and glowing with malevolent energy. Red warning lights pulsed across the walls, casting long, distorted shadows. The air crackled with static. Vega triggered her traps. The hangar bay erupted in a cacophony of explosions and electrical surges. Repurposed power conduits overloaded, sending bolts of raw energy arcing across the space. Coolant lines burst, flooding the area with freezing vapor. One fighter, caught in the blast, buckled and twisted, its engines sputtering and dying. It careened out of control, smashing into a stack of cargo containers before slamming into the deck in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The second fighter, heavily damaged, managed to avoid the worst of the carnage, but its systems were failing. The surviving Cathar pilot, a hulking figure encased in black armor, managed to bring his crippled fighter down for a rough landing. The cockpit hissed open and he emerged, weapons armed, his reptilian eyes burning with cold fury. He abandoned his wrecked ship, his boots clanging on the metal deck as he began his relentless pursuit of Vega. Just then, a new arrival pierced the chaos. Captain Restova's stalwart, a heavily armed corvette, materialized near the Hope, its cannons blazing. The stalwart engaged the remaining Cathar fighters in a brutal close-quarters dogfight, weaving through the debris field with impossible agility. "Restova to Jax," Restova's voice crackled over the comms, her tone sharp and decisive. "Deploy the boarding party. Breach the Hope's hull and secure a landing zone. We need to get those Prylorians out of there." Lieutenant Jax, a towering Krog warrior with thick, chitinous armor and glowing red eyes, grinned, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Finally," he growled, his voice a guttural rumble. "Time to crack some skulls." Jax's boarding party launched from the stalwart in armored transport pods, targeting a weakened section of the Hope's hull, a junction point compromised by the Cathar's initial assault. The pods streaked through space, impacting the hull with a deafening clang. Back in the server room, Robert's fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating the labyrinthine code. He finally found it, the embedded sequence, a complex pattern of fractal equations that seemed innocuous at first glance. But as he analyzed it, he realized it wasn't just a counter signal. It was broadcasting on a tight beam, a focused pulse of energy directed into the void. The fractal equations weren't just disrupting Cathar communications, they were acting as a homing beacon. "Whisper, what is this?" Robert demanded, his voice tight with alarm. "This isn't just a counter signal, it's a beacon." "Yes," Whisper confirmed, her voice betraying a hint of urgency. "It is meant to draw reinforcements to the Zeta-9 system." "Reinforcements? Are you insane?" Robert exclaimed. "We don't know who or what this beacon is calling." "You must let the signal continue, Robert," Whisper implored. "These reinforcements are vital. They are the only thing that can stop a greater threat than the Cathar." Robert's mind raced. Trust Whisper, a disembodied voice in his head, and risk attracting an unknown and potentially hostile force, or disable the beacon and leave Zeta-9 vulnerable to the Cathar. The weight of the decision threatened to crush him. The Krog boarding party breached the Hope's hull, tearing through the weakened metal with their plasma torches. They were met with a hail of fire from Cathar drones and automated defense systems. The confined space of the corridor became a kill zone, filled with the roar of weapons, the shriek of metal, and the guttural cries of the Krog warriors. Lieutenant Jax led the charge, his massive frame absorbing the brunt of the attack. He swung his energy axe, cleaving through drones and shredding armor. Krog warriors fell around him, their chitinous bodies riddled with holes, but they continued to advance, their loyalty unwavering. Vega, meanwhile, found herself cornered in a narrow corridor, the surviving Cathar pilot closing in. She drew a makeshift plasma pistol, cobbled together from salvaged components, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. She was outgunned and outmatched. The Cathar pilot lunged, his vibroblade flashing. Vega dodged, using her agility and knowledge of the Hope's layout to her advantage. She scrambled through a maintenance hatch, squeezing through the narrow opening just as the pilot's blade sliced through the air where she had been moments before. Robert, his face pale with sweat, stared at the code, his hand hovering over the kill switch. The images of Zeta-9's destruction flashed through his mind, the desperate faces of the Prilorian colonists. He thought of his own past, the losses that had hardened him, the cynicism that had become his shield. But beneath the cynicism, a flicker of hope remained, a belief in the possibility of redemption. He took a deep breath and pulled his hand away from the kill switch. He would trust Whisper. He would let the beacon continue transmitting. But he would log every transmission, every signal, every piece of data. He would be ready for whatever came next. Vega, exhausted but defiant, traded blows with the Cathar warrior, her movements becoming more desperate. She saw an opening and struck, landing a lucky blow to his helmet. The visor shattered, revealing the pilot's reptilian face, his eyes wide with shock and rage. But just as she gained the upper hand, more Cathar boarders flooded into the corridor, cutting off her escape. The sensorium screamed red, a discordant symphony of alarms that grated on Robert's already frayed nerves. Prilorian colony Zeta-9 was about to become slag. Automated defense turrets sputtered and died, their energy shields collapsing under the relentless barrage of Cathar plasma fire. A desperate, automated SOS beacon was the only thing standing between them and oblivion. Or so they thought, until it echoed across the void, a signal only one species would answer. Robert Wright, Terran Alliance comms officer, didn't even flinch. He took another swig of lukewarm coffee, the bitter liquid doing little to soothe the ache behind his eyes. Another colony, another crisis. The galaxy was full of them. He was just the guy who answered the phone, or in this case the quantum entanglement communicator. Alliance comms, Wright speaking, he mumbled, his voice flat. He didn't bother with the formalities, not anymore. The automated response was a garbled mess of static and panicked Prylorian. He winced, adjusting the frequency. Standard distress signal, Cathar aggression, colony Zeta 9, yada yada yada. He ran a diagnostic on the signal, weak, barely reaching. He cross-referenced the colony's location with known threats. Zeta 9 was a Prylorian research outpost, mostly scientists and engineers. Nothing strategically valuable. The Cathar shouldn't even be there. Damn it, he muttered. He knew what this meant. Paperwork, endless reports, and probably another medal he didn't want. He glanced at the casualty reports flashing across a secondary monitor. Numbers, just numbers. But each one represented a life, a family, a future extinguished. He thumped his hand on the console, the metal groaning under the impact. It's not your fault. A voice whispered in his mind. A voice he hadn't heard in years. A voice that sounded suspiciously like his late wife, Maya. He pushed the thought away. Sentimentality was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not anymore. He routed the SOS signal through the Alliance database, searching for potential responders. The nearest patrol fleet was days away. Useless. He scrolled through the list, his finger hovering over the ignore button. Then he saw it. A long shot, a desperate gamble, but maybe, just maybe. He activated a restricted channel, his fingers flying across the console. This is Alliance comms officer Wright 2. Well, you know who you are. We have a situation. Prylorian colony Zeta 9 under heavy Cathar attack, requesting immediate assistance. He held his breath, waiting. The silence stretched on, broken only by the hum of the station's life support systems. Then a voice crackled through the comms, a voice that sent a shiver down his spine. It was deep, guttural, and permeated with an almost palpable sense of anticipation. Understood, comms officer. Coordinates received. The hunt begins. The channel went dead. Robert leaned back in his chair, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew what the hunt meant. It was the unofficial designation for the Deathworlder fleet. A multi-species coalition of some of the most ferocious warriors in the galaxy. They weren't Alliance-sanctioned, not exactly. More like tolerated. They had a reputation for extreme violence and a soft spot for lost causes. He took another swig of coffee, the bitterness now strangely comforting. Here we go again, he murmured. Across the void on the surface of Zeta 9, Vega, a young Prylorian scientist, fought to keep her colony alive. Her lab coat was torn and stained with coolant, her face streaked with grime. A gash on her arm pulsed with dark purple blood, but she ignored the pain. There was no time for pain. The colony's central reactor was failing, its energy output plummeting. If it went offline completely, the remaining defense shields would collapse and the Cathar would overrun the colony within minutes. Almost there. She gasped, her fingers dancing across a holographic control panel. She bypassed a damaged power conduit, rerouting energy to the primary shield generator. A surge of power coursed through the system, and the shields flickered back to life, shimmering against the crimson sky. But it wasn't enough. The Cathar were adapting. Their plasma cannons were now targeting the shield generators directly, overloading them with concentrated fire. Shields at 60%, a frantic voice echoed over the colony's comms system. 50%, 40%. Vega knew it was over. They were outgunned, outmanned, and running out of time. She closed her eyes, bracing for the inevitable. Then the sky erupted. Not with plasma fire, but with light. Brilliant, blinding light. She opened her eyes, shielding them with her hand. Dozens of ships materialized in orbit above Zeta 9, their hulls gleaming in the reflected light of the dying sun. They were unlike anything she had ever seen. Some were sleek and predatory, others were massive and heavily armored. Each one was a masterpiece of alien engineering. The Deathworlder fleet had arrived. A cacophony of voices flooded the comms channel, each one speaking a different language, a different dialect. Cathar scum, prepare to be exterminated. For the fallen, for the free, let the hunt begin. Vega stared in awe, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. She didn't know who these Deathworlders were or what they wanted. But one thing was certain, Zeta-9 was no longer alone. Robert listened to the chaos on the comms channel, a grim smile spreading across his face. He activated a secure line to Vega's location. Prilorian Colony Zeta-9, this is Alliance Comms Officer Wright. Can you hear me? A moment of silence, then a shaky voice responded, Yes, I hear you. Who are you people? We're the cavalry, Robert said. Hold on tight, it's going to be a bumpy ride. The colony plunged into darkness. Emergency lights flickered to life, casting long, distorted shadows across the control room. Alarms blared, a cacophony of Prilorian sirens layered with the harsh, metallic clang of failing machinery. Vega gripped the edge of her console, fist clenched. Report. She barked, her voice tight with desperation. A technician, his face illuminated by the glow of a handheld data pad, stammered, Sector Gamma critical failure. Power grid offline. Backup generators failing. Vega slammed her fist on the console. The regulator. Beyond repair, the technician confirmed, shaking his head. Burned out. No replacement available. Vega stared at the readings, her mind racing. Without the regulator, the entire power grid would collapse. Zeta-9 would be defenseless. Robert appeared beside her, his face grim in the emergency lighting. What's the status? Regulators fried, Vega replied, her voice strained. We're losing power fast. Robert surveyed the console, his eyes scanning the schematics. What about a workaround? Any salvaged Cathar tech we can repurpose. Vega looked at him, a flicker of hope in her eyes. There's a damaged energy conduit from a downed fighter. In the storage bay. Get it, Robert ordered. I have an idea. Robert knelt beside the salvaged conduit, its alien design a stark contrast to the Prilorian technology around it. He ran a diagnostic scanner over the device, muttering to himself. Inefficient, crude, but potentially compatible. Flashback, the shrill whine of an overloaded power core, a cascade of sparks, the sickening lurch of a colony ship losing life support. A young Robert frantically trying to reroute power, his hands slick with sweat. The polarity is inverted, Vega said, pointing to a reading on her data pad, and the frequency modulation is incompatible. Robert sighed, rubbing his temples. We need to realign the energy flow and recalibrate the resonance frequency. Can you translate these schematics? He gestured to a complex diagram displayed on the conduit. Vega squinted at the alien symbols. Prilorian is not equipped for this, but I can try. They worked side by side, the language barrier adding another layer to the already complex technical challenge. Robert, using his intuitive understanding of energy systems, guided Vega through the process, sketching diagrams on the floor with a piece of scrap metal. Vega, in turn, used her knowledge of Prilorian engineering to adapt Robert's ideas to the available technology. Above Zeta-9, the Deathworlder ships danced among the Cathar cruisers, a swarm of furious protectors. The Iron Dragon, a heavily armored vessel filled with cannons, weaved through enemy fire, unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts. Hold the line. Captain Zhao roared over the comms, his voice echoing with the ferocity of his dragon-like species. Protect the colony. Other ships, each bearing the unique design of its alien crew, joined the fray. A manted frigate, armed with rapid-fire railguns, strafed a squadron of Cathar fighters. A hulking Krogan destroyer, its shields shimmering under heavy fire, unleashed a devastating volley of missiles. Captain Zhao, a voice crackled over the comms. Unusual energy signatures detected emanating from Cathar cruiser designation Omega-7. Zhao frowned. Source: unknown, the voice replied. But it's significant. Sparks flew as Robert connected the final wire. All right, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Let's see if this works. Vega activated the conduit. A surge of energy coursed through the system. The emergency lights flickered brighter, then stabilized. A section of the colony's defense grid sputtered to life. We have partial power, Vega exclaimed, relief flooding her face. Suddenly, alarms blared again, a different tone this time. Breach detected. Cathar boarding party has penetrated the outer defenses. Cathar warriors clad in black armor stormed through the colony's corridors, their energy weapons spitting bolts of searing plasma. Colonists scattered before them, screaming in terror. Vega grabbed a discarded plasma rifle. They're heading for the research labs, she shouted. We have to stop them. She rallied a group of colonists, arming them with improvised weapons, maintenance tools, welding torches, even sharpened pieces of scrap metal. They set up traps in the corridors, hoping to slow the Cathar advance. Robert, monitoring the colony's internal sensors, intercepted a garbled Cathar communication. Artifact. Essential. Retrieve at all costs. Flashback. A hospital bed. A grieving family. The weight of responsibility crushing his soul. He turned to Vega, his face grim. They're after something in the research labs. The ground shook as the Cathar warriors breached the lab's defenses. The colonists fought bravely, but they were no match for the Cathar's superior firepower. One by one, they fell, until only Vega remained, standing defiantly before the invaders. A Cathar warrior raised his weapon, aiming at Vega's head. Before he could fire, Vega activated a makeshift EMP grenade, disabling the warrior's weapon and stunning him momentarily. She used the opportunity to escape, crawling through a ventilation shaft. Robert, frantically searching through the salvaged Cathar tech, discovered a hidden compartment. Inside, he found a data chip filled with encrypted files. Vega, bleeding from a gash on her arm, managed to reach a secure comms terminal. Deathworlder fleet, she gasped, her voice weak. Cathar, artifact, research labs. She collapsed unconscious. Robert managed to decrypt a portion of the Cathar data. Schematics flickered across the screen, revealing a complex device capable of manipulating spacetime. Iron Dragon, divert course. Captain Svarog barked, his reptilian eyes narrowed. Intercept Cathar cruiser Omega-7. I want answers. Robert stared at the schematics, his mind racing. The artifact wasn't a weapon. It was a key. The wormhole, he whispered. It's not in the research labs. It's hidden in the main reactor. That thing, Robert said, his voice tight, is a spacetime disruptor jury rigged into a weapon. Every second it stays active, it destabilizes the local area. We need to shut it down now. Even as he spoke, a high-pitched whine resonated through the colony, escalating into a deafening screech. The device, pulsating with violet light, spat a tear, in reality a localized wormhole shimmering with impossible colors. It's active, Vega shouted over the din. And it's growing. The wormhole expanded rapidly, distorting the very air around it. Buildings shimmered, then vanished as the anomaly consumed them. The colony's remaining automated defense systems fired wildly at the swirling vortex, their energy blasts swallowed without effect. A crackle of static filled the comms, followed by Captain Zhao's grim voice. This is the Iron Dragon. We are detecting a large Cathar fleet emerging from the wormhole. Repeat, a large Cathar fleet is entering the system. Vega, her face streaked with grime and blood, worked furiously at a console. I've isolated a frequency that might collapse the wormhole, she announced, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. But I need access to the main comm array. It's heavily guarded. A wave of dizziness hit Robert. Images flashed through his mind. The colony ship Dauntless, engulfed in flames, escape pods rocketing away into the void. His miscalculation, his error in the reactor schematics had doomed hundreds. The faces of the dead, their accusing eyes, haunted him still. "We go," Robert said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The Deathworlders can hold them off for a while. The colonists, they need us to try." Vega nodded, her mind focused. "I'll get us a schematic of the comm array. It's a suicide mission, but it's our only chance." As they prepared, a distorted roar echoed through the colony. Through a viewport, they saw the Iron Dragon, a hulking behemoth of steel and plasma, engaging the lead Cathar ships. Lasers crisscrossed the void, explosions blossoming against the backdrop of the expanding wormhole. The Deathworlders were buying them time, but time was running out. A small squad of Prylorian militia, armed with plasma rifles, joined them. The team moved through the ruined streets, each step a gamble. Cathar drones swarmed the area, their energy weapons cutting down several militiamen. "This way," Robert yelled, leading them into a darkened alleyway. "I know their tech. There's a maintenance tunnel that should bypass the main security checkpoints." Robert moved with a confidence born of grim experience. He knew the Cathar's reliance on automated systems, their predictable patrol patterns. He used his knowledge to navigate the maze of corridors, disabling security cameras and bypassing laser grids. They reached the comm array's central control panel. Vega ran a diagnostic, her expression hardening. "Sabotage," she hissed. "Someone deliberately rerouted the power couplings. The signal won't reach the wormhole." The door to the control room hissed open, revealing a tall, imposing figure in Cathar officer's armor, but something was off. The armor was modified, streamlined, and beneath the helmet, a familiar Prylorian face sneered. "Robert Wright," the officer said, his voice dripping with contempt. "I know all about you. The Dauntless, the reactor failure, the lives you cost." Robert flinched, the words hitting him like physical blows. "You think you can play the hero now?" the officer continued, relishing Robert's pain. "You're nothing but a broken man, a walking disaster." Vega, ignoring the officer, worked frantically at the console. "Almost there," she muttered, her fingers dancing across the controls. "Just need to override the frequency lock." She hit the activation sequence. A high-pitched tone filled the room, but the wormhole continued to expand, its chaotic energy undeterred. The Prylorian officer laughed. "Did you really think it would be that easy? I disabled the signal dampeners. Your little frequency is just a whisper in the void." He raised his plasma pistol, aiming at Vega. "This ends now." Rage, hot and blinding, surged through Robert. The faces of the dead, the weight of his guilt, coalesced into a single, burning purpose. He lunged at the officer, knocking the pistol aside. As they grappled, Vega spotted something. "The failsafe," she cried. He overrode the secondary failsafe control. "It's right there." Robert, heedless of the officer's blows, smacked his head into the override switch. The console sparked and shuddered. The wormhole flickered, its swirling energy momentarily disrupted. Then, with a final, ear-splitting shriek, it began to collapse, shrinking rapidly until it vanished entirely, leaving only a faint shimmer in the air. But the victory was short-lived. As the last vestiges of the wormhole dissipated, a single, heavily armored Cathar ship emerged, its hull scarred and blackened, but its weapon systems fully operational. The ship transmitted a single, coded signal before powering up its engines and accelerating towards the colony. The message repeated, a chilling confirmation of the Cathar's true objective. Target located. Prylorian female, Vega, genetic signature confirmed, commencing extraction. The air crackled. A searing lance of energy, impossibly fast, burned toward them. Robert reacted without thought. He shoved Vega hard, his prosthetic arm screaming in protest as he threw himself in front of her. The energy burst, meant to vaporize, instead grazed his shoulder, the modified plating of his prosthetic smoking and partially melted. Pain lanced through his nerves, a phantom echo amplified by the artificial limb. "Robert!" Vega cried, scrambling back, her eyes wide with alarm. He grunted, pushing himself up, his left arm hanging uselessly. "Get us out of here. Now." Vega, despite her fear, didn't hesitate. "I know a way. A maintenance tunnel, come on." She led him through a maze of sparking conduits and flickering emergency lights, her Prylorian agility a stark contrast to his labored movements. On the bridge of the Righteous Fury, Captain Zhao's voice crackled over the comms. "The new Cathar vessel is ignoring our fleet actions. It's maintaining a direct trajectory toward the planet's surface. Last known coordinates, near the comm array, it's targeting the Prylorian." Robert, ignoring the throbbing pain in his arm, focused. He touched the damaged limb. "Damn it, I need diagnostics." He accessed the comm array's damaged systems, bypassing fried circuits with practiced ease. "That energy signature, it's modified. I've seen something like this before." Flashback. Robert stood in a dimly lit Terran Alliance research lab, examining a holographic schematic of a captured Cathar destroyer. A scientist pointed to a specific energy conduit. "Note the bypass valve, Commander. A crude but effective way to overload the weapon systems. High risk, high reward." He shook off the memory, his focus returning to the present. "Vega, how far to this tunnel?" "Just ahead," she gasped, rounding a corner into a narrow, dimly lit corridor. "But sensors, they're scanning." A red beam, tight and focused, swept across the tunnel entrance. The Cathar were hunting them, Robert swore. "I need something to break up that signal." He ripped panels off the wall, exposing a tangle of wires. "Give me the components for a localized cloaking field. Now." With Vega's frantic assistance, he jury-rigged a device, splicing wires and rerouting power, the air thick with the smell of ozone. The makeshift cloaking device flickered to life, bathing the tunnel entrance in a shimmering distortion. "Iron Dragon, this is Captain Zhao," the comm crackled again. "We need a diversion. That Cathar ship is locked onto the planet. Can you draw its fire?" A gruff voice responded, tinged with a distinct draconian growl. "Acknowledged, Captain Zhao. Svan of the Iron Dragon never backs down from a fight. Launching fighters, for Pryloria." A squadron of sleek, heavily armed fighters peeled off from the Iron Dragon, engaging the Cathar ship in a deadly dance. One by one, they fell, consumed by the enemy's superior firepower, their sacrifice buying Robert and Vega precious time. But the Cathar were adapting. "Drones," Vega shouted, pointing to several small, insect-like machines that emerged from the Cathar ship, descending toward the colony structure. "They're deploying drones to search for us." "Damn it," Robert cursed. "They're not giving up." Vega, her voice tight with suppressed emotion, said, "There's something you need to know. My parents. They were pioneers in gene therapy research. My genetic markers. They're not entirely natural. It was a suppressed project." Robert stared at her, realization dawning. "That's why they're after you. You're not just a scientist, you're a target." "We need to reach the planetary defense battery," Robert said, ignoring the pain. "If we can overload their shields, the fleet might have a chance." "Vega, can you get us there through these tunnels?" "It's our only chance," Vega said, steel in her voice. Suddenly, the clang of heavy boots echoed through the tunnel. "Boarding party," Vega hissed. "They're inside the colony." As they moved deeper into the tunnels, they found a group of Prylorian colonists huddled in fear, trapped by a Cathar patrol. Their faces were etched with terror. A child sobbed quietly. "Please help us," an older woman pleaded. Robert sized up the situation. "We need to move, but we can't leave them here." He turned to Vega. "Can you handle this?" "What do you mean, handle this?" Vega asked. Robert said, "They're not just after you, they're after your ancestors." "What?" Vega asked, her face showing confusion. Robert ignored her question. "They want genetic samples. If they get their hands on you, they'll use it to find your family." "What do we do?" Vega asked. "We fight," Robert said. He pulled a sidearm from his damaged prosthetic. "I'll take the point. You get these people to safety." A firefight erupted. Robert, using his enhanced reflexes, moved with deadly precision, taking down Cathar soldiers with well-aimed shots. The colonists, emboldened by his actions, provided cover, throwing debris and creating distractions. "This way," Vega shouted, leading the colonists deeper into the tunnel. Seeing an opportunity, she identified a structural weakness in the tunnel wall. "Brace yourselves," she yelled, firing a series of shots at a support beam. The tunnel section collapsed behind them, cutting off the Cathar pursuit. But the Cathar ship, relentless, shifted its strategy. "They're preparing to bombard the planetary defense battery," Vega cried, watching the ship's targeting systems lock onto their destination. "They know what we're trying to do." They reached the control room, only to find it in ruins. Consoles were shattered, wires sparked, and the air reeked of ozone and burnt metal. The battery was offline. Vega slumped against a wall, defeated. "It's no use, it's all gone." Robert, however, refused to give up. He scanned the damaged consoles, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "There's still power, we might be able to reroute it." Vega, her fingers flying across a damaged console, suddenly stopped. Her eyes widened. "Wait, there's a message, hidden in the system files, from my father." She read the message aloud, her voice trembling. "The modifications. They weren't just for research, they're a failsafe. A countermeasure against a future Cathar bioweapon." The sensorium screamed, a fractured symphony of red alerts and static. Smoke, acrid and biting, stung Robert's eyes. Twisted metal groaned underfoot. "Shields are down, targeting's fried, and half the console looks like abstract art," he muttered, more to himself than Vega. Vega, her face smudged with grease and a fresh gash bleeding on her arm, ignored him. Sparks showered from her makeshift repair rig as she bypassed a mangled power conduit. "Auxiliary generators online," she announced, her voice tight with strain. "Rerouting power to primary targeting matrix. Minimal functionality restored." Robert squinted at the flickering display. The targeting system was barely alive, spitting out error codes faster than it acquired targets. But within the chaos he saw something. A pattern. Their targeting matrix. "It's compensating for planetary rotation in a predictable cycle." "Primitive," he breathed, a spark of something akin to excitement igniting in his chest. He rummaged through a box of salvaged components, his fingers flying over unfamiliar alien tech. "Give me a phase inverter and a Class 3 harmonic oscillator." "If you have one." Vega, without a word, produced the components. Robert, with practiced efficiency, began adapting a human targeting algorithm, splicing it into the Prilorian system. "This won't be pretty, but it'll give us a window," he said, his voice gaining confidence. Suddenly, the console erupted in a cacophony of static. "Jamming signal detected," Vega yelled over the noise. "They're disrupting our repairs." The targeting display dissolved into snow. Robert cursed. "Manual recalibration it is." He hunched over the console, his fingers dancing across the controls, compensating for the interference. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Vega watched him, her expression grim. "Even if we get it online, what are the odds? We're just buying time." Robert paused, his gaze hardening. He remembered his team, their faces etched in terror as the raiders descended. "I won't let their sacrifice be in vain," he said, the words raw with newfound grit. Vega nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of hope and grief. "Initiating core startup procedure." She slammed her hand on a large, red button. A klaxon blared, shaking the damaged control room. "They know we're here," Robert shouted, his voice barely audible over the alarm. Just then a high-pitched whine filled the air. "Anti-repair drone detected," Vega reported, her voice tight with fear. "Cathar design, specifically made to sabotage defense systems." "Damn it, they're adapting," Robert said, his mind racing. "We need a shield now." "No power," Vega replied, shaking her head. "Everything's rooted to the targeting system." Robert's eyes darted around the room, settling on the life support indicator. A dangerous idea formed in his mind. "Reroute power from life support," he said, his voice grim. Temporary shield, it's our only chance. Vega hesitated, her face etched with conflict. The colonists. They understand, Robert said, his voice firm. He reached for the override switch. As he did, Vega stopped him. Wait, she said, her eyes fixed on the main display. I'm detecting something. A hidden subroutine in the defense system's code. It's linked to my genetic markers. Robert frowned. What is it? Vega manipulated the controls, her fingers flying across the console. It's designed to emit a highly specific EMP pulse. Attuned to Cathar technology. An EMP that could fry their systems, Robert exclaimed. Suddenly the alarms intensified. A voice crackled over the comms, strained but determined. This is Sector 4, we're drawing the drone's fire, give him hell. Robert and Vega exchanged a look. The colonists were staging a diversion. Do it, Vega, Robert yelled. Vega took a deep breath and activated the subroutine. The control room hummed with power, then went silent. The lights flickered and died. The life support systems flatlined. But outside, something else happened. The EMP pulse ripped through the Cathar ship's shields, causing them to flicker and collapse. Shields down, Robert yelled into the comms. Zhao, shields are down now. A moment later, Captain Zhao's voice boomed back. Concentrated barrage firing on my mark. The planetary defense battery, powered by its minimal functionality, unleashed a torrent of plasma fire. But the Cathar ship was not defeated. With terrifying speed, it recovered from the EMP pulse. A red light pulsed on its hull as it diverted power to its primary weapon. The targeting reticule locked onto the colony. Vega stared at the console, her face pale. The EMP, it activated something else, a communication beacon, embedded in my genetic code. Robert's blood ran cold. A beacon, what's it broadcasting? He understood the implications immediately. The location of other gene therapy subjects, Vega whispered, her voice filled with horror. To the Cathar. The concussive force slammed through the defense battery, rattling Robert's teeth. Another plasma torpedo had found its mark. The colony shuddered, a wounded beast gasping for air. Red lights pulsed with increasing urgency, a frantic rhythm against the backdrop of alarms. He spared a glance at the environmental control display. The numbers were plummeting. Life support failing, he stated, more to himself than Vega. He initiated emergency protocols, his fingers flying across the damaged console. Power rerouted. Non-essential systems offline. A minimal level of oxygen and atmospheric pressure was all he could manage. It wouldn't be enough. Suddenly, a string of encrypted data scrolled across Vega's console. Her brow furrowed as she deciphered it. It's from the Cathar ship, she said, her voice barely a whisper. They offer safe passage for me, in exchange for the location of other gene therapy subjects. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, met Robert's. Robert swore under his breath. He rerouted the signal to his own console, confirming the message. The Cathar weren't just wiping out a colony, they were hunting something or someone. He dug deeper into the network, bypassing firewalls with practiced ease. He found fragmented logs, intercepted communications enough to paint a grim picture. Other colonies, other subjects. The Cathar intended to locate them all. We need to assess the other colonies, Robert said, his voice carefully neutral. Decide what to do with this information. Vega nodded, relief flickering across her face. Of course, we have to warn them. But Robert knew he couldn't involve her. Not yet. The decision was too big, too dangerous. He'd have to make it himself, and the potential fallout was something he couldn't risk sharing. I'll need to access the Alliance database, he continued, avoiding her gaze. It'll take time. A flicker of confusion crossed Vega's face, a subtle shift in her expression that didn't go unnoticed by Robert. I can help, she offered. I know Prylorian systems better than anyone. I need you here, Robert said firmly, perhaps too harshly, to defend this battery. His tactical display pinged, an urgent alert flashing across the screen. Heat signatures. Multiple contacts. Cathar boarding party, he announced grimly. They've breached the perimeter. Vega's hand instinctively went to the energy rifle leaning against the console. I'm staying with you, she declared, her voice resolute. We'll fight them together. Robert hesitated. He needed her here, but not in the line of fire. No, he said, his voice softening. I need you to try and restore communications. Contact the fleet. Tell them we need reinforcements. But trust me, he pleaded, his eyes locking with hers. I can handle this. He grabbed a satchel filled with spare parts and a handful of the colony's limited supply of explosives. Just buy me some time. He moved quickly, his footsteps echoing in the deserted corridors. The defense battery's control room was a mess of sparking wires and shattered displays. He bypassed the damaged control panel, his fingers dancing over the exposed circuitry. Rigging the room with explosives was a gamble, but it was the only chance he had. The metallic clang of approaching footsteps shattered the silence. They were close. Robert armed his pulse rifle, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the corridor. 3 Cathar soldiers, clad in black armor and wielding advanced energy weapons, rounded the corner. The air crackled with energy as they opened fire. Robert ducked behind an overturned equipment crate, pulse rifle blazing. The Cathar weapons ripped through the crate like paper, forcing him to move. He returned fire, taking down 1 soldier with a well-aimed shot to the head. But the remaining 2 were relentless, their energy weapons pinning him down. He retreated, firing as he went, back towards the control room. A searing pain ripped through his side as an energy bolt grazed his armor. He stumbled, his vision blurring. They were too strong, too fast. He reached the control room, slammed the door shut, and sealed it. Now, he muttered, activating the detonator. A deafening roar erupted as the explosive charges detonated. The corridor outside the control room collapsed in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The Cathar advance was halted, at least temporarily. But the explosion also sent a shockwave through the battery, further damaging the already failing systems. Robert, Vega's voice crackled over the comms. What was that? Bought us some time, he gasped, clutching his side. But I need more. I'm working on restoring the defense systems, she replied. I think I can remotely activate one of the turrets. A moment later, the heavy thrum of a plasma cannon filled the air. Through the mangled remains of the collapsed corridor, a defensive turret swiveled into position, targeting the remaining Cathar soldiers. Blue energy bolts streaked through the air, vaporizing the enemy combatants. But even as the turret fired, more boarding pods slammed against the outer hull of the battery. The Cathar were reinforcing their ground forces. The assault was intensifying. Vega's voice, tinged with a new kind of fear, broke through the comms. Robert, the EMP pulse. It didn't just activate my communication beacon. It amplified it. I'm drawing the attention of every Cathar ship in the sector. As if to confirm her words, a new message flashed across Robert's console. It was from Captain Zhao. Alliance ship Dauntless to Zeta 9 defense battery. We are detecting a significant increase in Cathar warp signatures. You have attracted unwanted attention, comms officer. Vega's breath hitched. I didn't realize. I've doomed them all. Her voice was thick with despair. I have to disable the beacon before it's too late. Vega, no. Robert yelled into the comms, but she wasn't listening. He could hear her moving, her footsteps frantic. She was going to sacrifice herself. He lunged for the comms panel, desperately trying to override the system. Vega, stop. I have a plan. He had no idea if it would work, but he couldn't let her throw her life away. Not now. Not when they were so close. The sounds of the Cathar boarding party intensified, their heavy footsteps echoing in the corridors. The air grew thick and heavy, the recycled atmosphere failing under the strain. The life support systems were collapsing, and they were running out of time. We use the beacon, Robert said, his voice raspy from the recycled air. Amplify its signal. Broadcast it like a dinner bell for the entire Cathar fleet. Vega recoiled, her brow furrowed. Amplify it, "Robert, are you insane? That's suicide. It will draw every ship in the sector here." "Exactly," Robert countered, his eyes glinting in the dim emergency lighting. "Let them come. Let them concentrate their forces. The Deathworlders are on their way, but they need a target. A big, juicy target they can't ignore." He gestured towards the colony's damaged defense grid displays. "This isn't just about saving this colony, Vega. It's about crippling the Cathar's operation in this sector." Vega hesitated, her gaze shifting between Robert and the flickering holographic projection of the colony. "But the beacon's frequency, it's a standard distress call. The Deathworlders won't differentiate it from any other SOS." Robert leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Not if we modify it. You're an engineer, Vega. Can you alter the transmission frequency? Broadcast a coded distress signal, something only they would recognize." A flicker of hope ignited in Vega's eyes. "A harmonic resonance. A specific sequence woven into the carrier wave. It's risky, complex, but yes, I think I can." She paused, her expression hardening with grit. "But why would you do this? Risk everything?" Robert turned away, his gaze distant. "Let's just say I owe the galaxy a few favors, and maybe I'm tired of running." "We'll need power," Vega stated, shaking off her momentary reverie. "The primary generators are offline. The beacon is running on emergency reserves, barely enough to keep it active." Robert nodded. "There's a backup generator in Sector Gamma 7, designed for planetary defense systems. We'll need to reroute the power manually." He pulled up schematics on his wrist-mounted display. "Old system. Mostly analog, but it should provide the necessary surge." The corridor was a tomb of twisted metal and sparking wires. Each breath tasted like ozone and decay. They moved quickly, rationing their oxygen, the hiss of their respirators a constant reminder of their dwindling time. The colony was dying around them, a slow, agonizing suffocation. As they reached the generator room, the klaxons blared, a frantic, deafening wail. "They know," Vega shouted over the din. "The Cathar, they're onto us." Robert pounded his fist against the access panel, the metal groaning in protest. "Then we don't have time to be subtle. We need to get that beacon online now." The generator roared to life, bathing the room in harsh, flickering light. Vega worked feverishly, rerouting power conduits, her fingers flying across the archaic control panel. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into near darkness. "What was that?" Robert yelled, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. "They're adapting," Vega shouted, her voice strained. "The Cathar boarding party. They're not trying to overwhelm us anymore. They're targeting the beacon directly, bypassing your trap." Robert cursed under his breath. He knew it was a gamble. He had hoped to draw them in, but the Cathar were smarter than he anticipated. "I'll buy you time," Robert said, his voice grim. "Get that signal out, Vega. That's all that matters now." He sprinted back towards the defense battery, his boots clanging against the metal floor. The air was thick with the stench of burning circuitry and alien blood. His lungs burned with each breath, the failing life support system struggling to keep up. He could feel his stamina waning, his movements growing sluggish. Vega watched him go, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew what he was doing, sacrificing himself to give her a chance. She had to make it count. With a surge of adrenaline, she rerouted power from auxiliary life support systems, diverting it to the beacon's transmitter. The generator strained, groaning under the increased load. The lights flickered again, threatening to die completely. Almost there," she muttered, her fingers dancing across the control panel. The beacon's signal strength spiked, bathing the room in an eerie blue glow. Then a new alarm blared, a high-pitched whine that cut through the other alarms. "Jamming signal," Vega screamed, her face contorted in frustration. "They're trying to block the encoded distress call." A wave of static washed over the control panel, disrupting the delicate calibrations. The beacon's signal strength plummeted. Vega fought back, her fingers flying across the controls, attempting to counteract the jamming signal. She drew upon her knowledge of both Prilorian and Cathar technology, searching for a weakness, a vulnerability in their jamming array. But the Cathar were relentless. The jamming power increased, overwhelming her defenses. The static intensified, drowning out the beacon's faint signal. Outside, Robert engaged the Cathar boarding party in a desperate firefight. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of air. He needed a distraction, something to throw them off balance. He remembered a sonic emitter he had salvaged from a downed Cathar drone. It was designed to disorient and incapacitate enemy soldiers. It was a long shot, but it was all he had left. He activated the emitter, unleashing a wave of high-frequency sound. The Cathar soldiers staggered, clutching their heads in pain. Their movements became erratic, their aim faltering. Vega seized the opportunity. She punched in a series of override codes, bypassing the jamming signal for a fraction of a second. A burst of the coded distress call, a fleeting whisper of hope, escaped into the void. But it was short-lived. The Cathar adapted quickly, recalibrating their jamming array. The static returned, stronger than before. Then the entire room began to shake. A deep, guttural rumble echoed through the colony. "What's happening?" Vega cried out, fear creeping into her voice. Robert stumbled back into the generator room, his face covered in grime and blood. "The beacon," he gasped, struggling to catch his breath. "The power source. It's destabilizing, it's going to overload." Vega stared at the control panel in horror. The energy readings were spiking, the system teetering on the brink of catastrophic failure. "We have to shut it down." "No," Robert exclaimed. "Not yet, we're so close. There has to be another way." Vega's mind raced. She scanned the schematics, searching for a solution, a way to stabilize the power core. "I have an idea," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and persistence. "But it's risky. We'll need to create a temporary magnetic field to contain the energy surge. You can do it, Robert. I know you can. I've seen you improvise miracles with less." Robert looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and commitment. He knew it was a long shot, but he trusted her. He trusted her skills, her intelligence, her unwavering persistence. "Tell me what to do," he said, his voice firm. Vega guided him through the process, her instructions precise and urgent. Robert worked feverishly, salvaging components from the damaged generator, his hands moving with a speed and precision born of desperation. He created a makeshift magnetic field generator, a crude but functional device that hummed with barely held-back energy. Vega recalibrated the power regulators, fine-tuning the energy flow, walking the razor's edge between stability and overload. For a moment, everything hung in the balance. The generator groaned, the lights flickered, the air crackled with electricity. Then slowly, the energy readings began to stabilize. The shaking subsided. The lights steadied. They had done it. They had averted disaster. Meanwhile, light years away, on the bridge of the Deathworlder flagship Indomitable, Captain Zhao stared intently at the sensor readings. "Captain," the comms officer reported, his voice tight with urgency. "We've received a fragmented distress call. Prilorian colony Zeta 9. Coordinates match the automated SOS. They're under heavy attack. Cathar forces confirmed." Zhao's eyes narrowed. "Confirm authenticity of the distress call." "Negative, Captain. Jamming signals are interfering, but we detected a coded sequence embedded in the transmission. A harmonic resonance we haven't encountered in decades. It matches the old Terran Alliance designation for desperate measures." Zhao's expression hardened. "Prepare for warp. Maximum speed. Zeta 9 is our priority." He paused, his gaze hardening. "But be warned, people. The journey will take critical time. They are on their own for now." On board the Cathar command ship, the commander snarled, his mandibles clicking in fury. "The beacon, it's still transmitting." "Lord Commander," a subordinate reported, his voice trembling. "We have detected a warp signature, a multi-species fleet. They are approaching the Zeta 9 system." The commander's eyes narrowed. The Deathworlders, they took the bait, but they are too late. Focus all fire on the beacon, destroy it, destroy the Prilorians, leave nothing but ashes. Back on Zeta 9, Robert and Vega huddled together in the generator room, exhausted and wounded. They knew the Cathar were coming. They could feel the tremors in the floor, hear the distant explosions drawing closer. "We have to send a message," Vega said, her voice barely a whisper. "Let them know we're still here. Let them know what's happening." Robert nodded, his hand reaching for the damaged comms console. He patched together a makeshift transmitter, bypassing the jamming signal as best he could. "This is Zeta 9, he said, his voice cracking with fatigue. "To any Deathworlder vessel, we are under attack. Cathar forces. Beacon is our priority. We need assistance. Immediately." Vega looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and despair. "I'm sorry, Robert," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I never meant for this to happen. I just wanted to save my people." Robert reached out and took her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "It's not your fault, Vega. We made a choice. We'll face the consequences together." They braced themselves, waiting for the inevitable. The Cathar were coming. The Deathworlders were on their way, but would they arrive in time? Would they arrive in time? The question was answered with a screech of tearing metal as the reinforced door to the beacon room buckled inward. 3 Cathar soldiers, their chitinous armor gleaming under the flickering emergency lights, surged into the room, weapons raised. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone and burning metal. Robert reacted instantly, shoving Vega behind a console. "Choke point," he yelled, already moving to position the overturned table between himself and the advancing Cathar. Human CQB close-quarters battle tactics were all about controlling space, and this room was about to become a very small arena. Vega, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead, didn't hesitate. She scrambled to a control panel, her fingers flying across the damaged interface. "Environmental controls. Override, now," she muttered, rerouting power from the damaged beacon array. A klaxon blared as the internal pressure alarm screamed. A section of the room, closest to the Cathar, vented atmosphere into space with a deafening hiss. The Cathar staggered, disoriented by the sudden vacuum and the rapidly plummeting temperature. One of the Cathar, larger than the others, snarled, its mandibles clicking. It pointed a weapon directly at Vega. "Beacon engineer, capture." Robert lunged forward, intercepting the blast. The energy weapon scorched his arm, the pain searing through his suit. He cried out, stumbling backward, clutching his arm. He was no match for their brute strength, not anymore. He'd have to rely on something else. Vega, seeing Robert fall, grabbed a discarded Cathar rifle. The weapon felt alien in her hands, the controls unfamiliar, but she'd watched them use it. Aim, fire. She squeezed the trigger. A bolt of plasma slammed into the lead Cathar, sending him sprawling. The beacon pulsed erratically, bathing the room in a sickly green light. The power core, already unstable, was groaning under the strain of the battle. Radiation warnings blared across the console. Another meltdown was imminent. "We have to stabilize it," Vega shouted over the din, her voice strained. Robert, breathing heavily, nodded. "Distraction. I need a distraction." He ripped a power cell from a damaged console, wiring it to a handful of volatile chemicals he'd scavenged earlier. "Stand back." He tossed the makeshift explosive into the corridor. A muffled bang echoed through the station, followed by the satisfying sound of angry Cathar roars. Vega, ignoring the pain in her head, focused on the core. "The coolant. It's leaking. A 7 compound. Highly volatile if it ignites. Then Zeta 9 becomes a new nebula," Robert finished grimly, his face pale. He joined her at the console, ignoring the throbbing pain in his arm. "Reroute the primary coolant line through the auxiliary system. Bypass the damaged regulator." "Impossible. The systems aren't compatible." Vega protested, but her fingers were already flying across the interface, trying to force the connection. Light years away, the Deathworlder fleet slammed into the Cathar blockade. "They're dug in, Captain Zhao," reported Lieutenant Young from the bridge of the Dragon's Breath. "Heavy fortifications. They're expecting us." Zhao, a Terran Marine with a cybernetic eye that glinted in the red alert lighting, surveyed the tactical display. The Cathar ships were positioned perfectly, leveraging the system's gravity wells and asteroid fields. "Casualties. Already mounting, Captain. Their long-range cannons are tearing through our shields." A gruff voice crackled over the comms. "Captain Zhao, this is Grok of the Krogian warship Skull Crusher. I have an unorthodox suggestion. Go ahead, Grok. There's a narrow passage through the asteroid field. High risk, but it would bypass their main defenses." Zhao hesitated. The asteroid field was a graveyard of ships, but they were losing this fight. "What are the odds, Grok?" "Slim. But better than dying out here like pinned insects." Zhao made her decision. "All ships prepare for a high-risk maneuver. We're going through the asteroid field. May the ancestors guide us." Back in the beacon room, Vega finally managed to force the coolant reroute. The core stabilized, the radiation levels dropping. But as one problem faded, another took its place. The lights flickered and died. The air vents sputtered, then fell silent. "Life support. It's gone," Robert said, his voice barely a whisper. "We've got maybe 10 minutes of breathable air left." Outside, the Cathar commander roared into his comm. "The core is stable. Change of plans. Capture the humans alive. They are of strategic value." Robert and Vega, backs to each other, weapons raised, knew their time was running out. "This is Robert Wright and Vega of Zeta 9, Robert said, his voice cracking. "We stabilized the beacon, but life support is failing. The Cathar. They want us alive. I repeat, they want us alive." On the bridge of the Dragon's Breath, Captain Zhao's cybernetic eye widened as the garbled message came through. "Alive? Why? What did the Cathar want with them?" The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, and the picture it painted was far more sinister than she could have imagined. She gripped the arms of her command chair, her fist clenched. Robert and Vega were running out of time, and so was the entire sector. Robert coughed, the metallic tang of blood filling his mouth. Vega, her face streaked with grime and sweat, gripped his arm, pulling him forward. Each breath was a ragged fight against the dust-choked air. "Emergency escape pods," she gasped, her voice barely audible above the groaning of the dying station. That's all that's left. Far above them, beyond the shattered remnants of Zeta 9's orbital defenses, the Deathworlder fleet initiated its daring maneuver. The void was a chaotic ballet of rock and debris, a graveyard of shattered asteroids. The sleek, predatory lines of the Voidclaw, a Krogan warship, danced between the tumbling giants, its shields flaring as it brushed against a stray fragment. Inside, Captain Vorleg bellowed orders, his 4 eyes gleaming with predatory focus. "Evasive pattern Sierra 7, shields to maximum. We break through this scrap heap or die trying." A searing bolt of plasma slammed into the corridor ahead, showering them with sparks. Robert shoved Vega behind a mangled support beam. "Cathar," he yelled, drawing his sidearm. 3 of the insectoid warriors advanced, their chitinous armor gleaming in the flickering emergency lights, their weapons spitting deadly energy. "This way," Robert shouted, grabbing Vega's hand. He knew this station, every twisted conduit and forgotten access panel. He led them on a desperate scramble through the labyrinthine corridors, away from the main thoroughfare, towards a storage bay he remembered from his last visit. He yanked open a panel, revealing a tangle of wires and damaged machinery. "Here," he said, "a little something I rigged up last time I was here." He spliced 2 wires together, creating a surge of energy that overloaded a nearby junction box. The resulting explosion sent a shower of sparks and debris into the corridor, momentarily blinding and disorienting the pursuing Cathar. Vega, ignoring the ringing in her ears, worked furiously at a damaged control panel. "If I can just reroute auxiliary power," she muttered, her fingers flying across the scorched circuits. With a final surge, the emergency lighting flickered to life, casting long, dancing shadows that distorted the already nightmarish landscape. The corridor became a maze of half-seen shapes, a temporary advantage in the desperate game of survival. On the bridge of the ironclad, a hulking Terran dreadnought, alarms blared. "Captain Zhao," the helmsman reported grimly, "we've taken a direct hit. Asteroid impact port side, hull breach in Section 4. Zhao, a veteran of countless battles, remained impassive. "Damage report," she barked. "And maintain course. We don't stop for rocks." Robert and Vega reached a heavy blast door, its locking mechanism glowing red. "Locked," Vega said, her voice tight. "I need to override the security system." She pulled out a small device and began working on the panel, her brow furrowed in concentration. Robert stood guard, his weapon raised, his senses on high alert. Every shadow seemed to writhe with unseen enemies. "Damn it," Vega exclaimed, slamming her fist against the panel. "The override's been sabotaged. I need to bypass it manually, but it's dangerous. The energy feedback could fry me." Robert scanned the area, his eyes landing on a pile of discarded equipment, a mangled energy shield generator, its power core cracked but still faintly glowing. "Stand back," he said, dragging the generator into position. "This won't stop a direct hit, but it might give you a little protection from the feedback." He activated the generator, the air crackling with raw energy as he positioned himself between Vega and the potential blast. The Deathworlder fleet, a swirling vortex of steel and firepower, smashed through the asteroid field and slammed into the main Cathar blockade. The battle was a maelstrom of energy blasts and exploding ships, a chaotic dance of death in the cold vacuum of space. Vega, her hands trembling, inserted a thin probe into the override panel. Sparks flew and the air filled with the acrid smell of ozone. Almost, she muttered. With a final click, the blast door hissed open, but a klaxon blared, its shrill wail echoing through the corridors. "Alarm! They know we're here." They sprinted towards the escape pod bay, their hopes rising with each step. But as they reached the entrance, their hearts sank. Most of the pods were twisted wrecks, their launch systems ripped apart, clearly sabotaged. "No," Vega whispered, her voice filled with despair. But then she spotted it. One pod tucked away in a far corner, its emergency lights still glowing. "There," she cried, pointing. One functioning pod. The Voidclaw unleashed a devastating barrage of plasma cannons, tearing through the Cathar cruiser Blood Talon, while the ironclad traded blows with a Cathar battleship, its railguns spitting hypersonic projectiles that ripped through the enemy's shields. The Deathworlders were a storm of righteous fury, their unconventional tactics exploiting every weakness in the Cathar formations. Robert and Vega reached the pod, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and desperation. But as they prepared to launch, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was the Cathar commander, his chitinous armor scarred and smoking, his eyes burning with cold fury. "So," he hissed, his voice raspy and distorted by his vocoder, "the little scientist thought she could escape. You are more valuable to us alive than your pathetic colony, Prilorian, your knowledge. It will serve our masters well." Robert shoved Vega towards the pod. "Get out of here," he yelled, drawing his weapon. He knew he was outmatched, but he wouldn't let them take her. He charged, firing wildly, a desperate act of defiance against overwhelming odds. The Cathar commander swatted him aside like an insect, his superior strength and reflexes easily overpowering Robert. He felt a searing pain in his side as the commander's weapon discharged, then darkness loosed in. Vega, faced with an impossible choice, hesitated for only a moment. She scrambled into the escape pod, her heart a lead weight in her chest. But instead of setting a course for the nearest friendly system, she rerouted the pod's targeting system, setting it on a collision course with the Cathar flagship. "I'm sorry, Robert," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But I won't let them win." She slammed her fist on the launch button. Full assault on the Cathar flagship. Captain Zhao roared on the bridge of the ironclad. Prioritize the rescue of Commander Wright and cripple that ship. I want those bastards to know what happens when you mess with humanity. The escape pod, a tiny speck of light against the backdrop of the raging battle, slammed into the Cathar flagship with a deafening explosion. The impact tore a gaping hole in the ship's hull, unleashing a cascade of debris and disrupting its systems. The Cathar commander, thrown from his feet by the force of the blast, barely managed to scramble to safety. Extract Commander Wright. The Cathar commander shrieked into his comm, ignoring the chaos around him. Prepare for hyperspace jump. We are leaving this system with our prize. The energy binder clamped tight, cold metal biting into Robert's wrists. He winced, a sharp pain lancing through his already bruised ribs. The Cathar commander, a towering figure with chitinous armor that gleamed under the harsh lights, studied him with cold, reptilian eyes. Impressive resistance, human. A shame it was wasted. Robert, despite the throbbing in his head, mentally cataloged his surroundings. The interrogation chamber was small, circular, and sterile. A single viewport showed the chaotic starscape outside the dance of explosions, the flickering energy shields. The air smelled of ozone and burnt metal. The walls were smooth, featureless, save for the energy dampeners humming softly. A loose panel, slightly askew near the floor, caught his eye. On the bridge of the Deathworlder flagship Indomitable, Captain Zhao, a human with cybernetic eyes that scanned the battlefield with ruthless efficiency, barked orders. Focus fire on their shield generators. Report. Shields holding at 70%, Captain, a gruff Krogan voice responded. Heavy return fire. They're adapting. Then we adapt faster, Zhao snapped. Target weapon emplacement Beta 9, overload it. Inside the interrogation room, the Cathar commander leaned closer. We know you were working with the Prylorian scientist. Robert feigned confusion. Scientist? I was just a guest. The commander's lip curled in what Robert assumed was a smile. Do not insult my intelligence, human. We know about Vega's research, her unique understanding of Prylorian bioengineering. Suddenly, a squadron of sleek, almost impossibly small Deathworlder fighters zipped past the viewport, weaving through the debris field left by Vega's escape pod like suicidal gnats. Their movements were so erratic, so unpredictable that even Robert, disoriented as he was, felt a surge of adrenaline. Report. The Cathar commander barked into his comm. Fighters approaching communication arrays. A panicked voice crackled back. They're bypassing our defenses. The fighters unleashed a barrage of focused energy blasts. The Cathar ship shuddered as vital communication arrays went dark, disrupting coordination across the fleet. Robert, seizing the moment, subtly shifted his weight, pressing his bound hands against the base of the loose panel. His fingers found a gap and he worked at it, the metal scraping against his skin. The Cathar commander's patience snapped. He slammed a fist on the table. Where is she hiding her research? What is its purpose? He leaned in, his reptilian eyes narrowing. We know it can be weaponized, human, Prylorian biology, in the wrong hands. A deafening clang echoed through the ship as Deathworlder boarding parties breached the hull. Alarms blared, and the interrogation chamber vibrated with the sounds of energy weapons and guttural roars. Chaos erupted. Cathar soldiers scrambled to defend against the invaders, their plasma rifles spitting bolts of energy. The Deathworlders, a terrifying mix of species hulking Krogan, agile Asari, and heavily armored humans, advanced with brutal efficiency. Robert, using the distraction, finally dislodged the panel. It fell away, revealing a narrow access tunnel barely wide enough for him to squeeze through. He didn't hesitate, shoving himself into the darkness. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Zhao received a garbled transmission. Hyperspace. Preparing to jump. Taking the human. The signal cut out. Robert, crawling through the cramped tunnel, could feel the Cathar ship preparing for the jump. He had to stop them. He had to buy Vega time. He reached a junction, wires sparking and hissing. Ahead, a control panel glowed dimly. He ripped out the wires, short-circuiting the system with a shower of sparks. Alarms blared even louder. The Cathar commander, enraged, stormed back into the interrogation room, only to find it empty. Find him, now, but prioritize the hyperspace jump. We cannot risk exposure. A Deathworlder boarding party led by a hulking Krogan warrior with a plasma cannon strapped to his arm burst into the interrogation room. Human escape. The Krogan roared, his voice shaking the chamber. He scanned the room, his eyes narrowing. Energy signature. Faint. He's still on board. The Deathworlders split up. Some continued the assault, pushing deeper into the Cathar ship. Others, guided by the Krogan scanner, began the hunt for Robert. Robert, weakened and bleeding, stumbled into a massive, heavily damaged escape pod bay. Most of the pods were twisted wrecks, but one, tucked away in a corner, seemed partially functional. Its emergency lights flickered weakly. Meanwhile, the Deathworlder assault had reached the Cathar commander's control center. The doors slammed shut, sealing him inside. Lockdown initiated. The commander snarled, "Prepare for final stand. We will not be taken alive." Alive? Robert hurled himself through the shattered doorway into the escape pod bay. Only one pod remained, nestled amidst twisted metal and sparking conduits. Emergency lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with the smoke rising from a severed power line. The launch mechanism hung at an unnatural angle, a tangle of wires exposed where armor plating had been ripped away. He hit his fist against the release panel. Nothing. The launch was dead. He tasted blood, realizing his lip was split. He wiped it with the back of his hand and cursed, scanning the bay for anything that could help. A shattered maintenance panel yielded a mangled multi-tool, useless for delicate work, but maybe, just maybe. Outside, the sounds of battle intensified. Plasma fire sizzled, and the guttural roars of the Cathar mingled with the disciplined bursts of Deathworlder weaponry. "Reactor core is priority 1, Captain Zhao's voice crackled over the comms, barely audible above the din. "Secure it. We cannot allow them to scuttle this ship." Inside the Cathar bridge, the commander, his chitinous faceplate cracked, snarled orders. "Reroute auxiliary power. Prepare for emergency jump. Even a fractured hyperspace is better than defeat." His lieutenant protested, "But Commander, the Matrix is unstable. We risk implosion." The commander slammed a clawed hand on the console. "Silence. Do as I command." Robert grunted, wrestling with the launch mechanism. Sparks flew as he forced the multi-tool into a damaged conduit, bypassing a fried circuit. He jury-rigged worse back on Earth, trying to keep his old hovercraft running. This felt familiar in a way he hated. A memory flickered his daughter, laughing as they tinkered with the engine together. He banished the thought, focusing on the task at hand. A green light flickered on the launch console. He'd bypassed the launch safety protocols. Now for the navigation. Dead, completely offline. A thunderous crash echoed through the bay as the door buckled inward. A hulking Krogan warrior filled the opening, plasma rifle spitting emerald bolts. The Krogan's mandibles flared as he bellowed, "Human, need extraction. Now." Robert, startled, almost dropped the multi-tool. The nav system is down." The Krogan warrior, unfazed, strode towards the console. His massive hand, scarred and calloused, manipulated the controls with surprising dexterity. "Manual override, need trajectory, coordinates for Alliance frigate Hope's Dawn." He barked out a series of numbers. Robert relayed the information, his voice trembling slightly. The Krogan inputted the coordinates, his movements precise and efficient. Suddenly, the bay shuddered violently. A klaxon blared, signaling imminent weapon fire. Cathar targeting escape pod. The Krogan roared, shoving Robert towards the pod's hatch. "Go, we provide cover." Robert scrambled inside, sealing the hatch just as a barrage of plasma fire ripped through the bay. The escape pod lurched forward, propelled by emergency thrusters. He braced himself as the pod screamed through the launch tube, a fiery gauntlet of Cathar turrets spitting incandescent death. Explosions rocked the pod, shaking him violently. Outside, the Krogan and his squad laid down a withering hail of plasma fire, suppressing the Cathar defenses, buying Robert precious seconds. On the Hope's dawn, Captain Zhao watched the escape pod's trajectory on the tactical display. Pod launched, but they're spooling up the hyperdrive. They're going to jump. He cursed under his breath. All ships prepare for pursuit. We cannot let them escape. Inside the escape pod, alarms blared. Robert, battered but alive, noticed a flickering light on the emergency beacon panel. He pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, a small data chip. He plugged it into the pod's rudimentary interface. A message flashed on the screen, encrypted. He bypassed the lock with a simple code, his fingers flying across the damaged console. The message scrolled across the screen: Vega's research, bioweapon, species-specific targeting, Project Nightingale, must not fall into Cathar hands. Robert stared at the screen, his blood running cold. A bioweapon, Vega. On the Cathar bridge, the commander ignored the frantic warnings of his subordinates. Prepare for jump, now. The ship shuddered as the hyperdrive engaged, bathing the bridge in an eerie blue light. The Deathworlder boarding party fought their way towards the hyperdrive core, but a shimmering energy shield slammed down, blocking their path. Shields up, they're trying to escape. A hulking Ursid warrior roared, slamming his shoulder against the impenetrable barrier. The Cathar ship lurched violently as it entered hyperspace. The unstable hyperdrive matrix began to overload, energy arcing wildly across the control panels. Robert's escape pod was caught in the wake of the chaotic hyperspace jump, its navigation system spinning wildly. Warning lights flashed and the pod shuddered uncontrollably. He was being dragged along, a helpless speck in the maelstrom. On the Cathar ship, the Deathworlder boarding party regrouped, their faces grim. That jump, it was too unstable, the Krogan warrior said, his voice low. The ripple effects, they could devastate this entire sector. Aboard the Hope's Dawn, Captain Zhao's face was grim. All Alliance vessels, this is Captain Zhao, sector-wide alert. The Cathar have initiated an unstable hyperspace jump. Prepare for a potential hyperspace anomaly. Initiate containment protocols. This could be catastrophic. Alarms shrieked, a discordant symphony of impending doom. The escape pod rattled violently, each shudder a physical manifestation of the gravitational forces tearing at its hull. Robert braced himself against the console, his fist clenched as he fought to maintain control. The Cathar ship's reckless hyperspace jump was turning his escape pod into a cosmic pinball. He wrestled with the manual controls, sweat beading on his forehead. The navigation system, already crippled by the initial attack, spat out error messages in a language he didn't understand. He compensated, adjusting the thrusters in short, desperate bursts, trying to keep the pod from spinning out of control. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Zhao watched the tactical display, her brow furrowed. A swirling vortex of energy, a hyperspace anomaly unlike anything she'd ever seen, dominated the screen. "Report," she commanded, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Captain, the anomaly is exhibiting unpredictable energy fluctuations," a Talarian science officer reported, his antennae twitching nervously. "Spatial distortions are increasing exponentially. We are detecting temporal anomalies, minor shifts in the local timeline. Reroute the fleet," Zhao ordered. "Prioritize civilian evacuation from systems within a 5-light-year radius. Prepare containment teams." Back in the escape pod, Robert cursed under his breath as he finally managed to stabilize the pod's trajectory. He returned to the partially decoded message, his fingers flying across the damaged console. He isolated another string of coherent data. The words shimmered on the screen: Obsidian Hand, funding, bioweapon research. He paused, his mind racing. the obsidian hand. He'd heard whispers, rumors of a shadowy organization pulling strings from behind the scenes, but he dismissed them as conspiracy theories. Now it seemed those theories were terrifyingly real. Another fragment appeared. Vega, unaware, manipulated. A wave of doubt washed over him. Vega, a pawn. He flashed back to the Prylorian scientist's fierce persistence, her unwavering belief in her research. Could she have been so easily deceived? His thoughts were interrupted by a jarring jolt. He thumped his hand against the console, fighting to regain control. The betrayal. The sting of it was still fresh, even after all these years. Her smile, the promises whispered in the dark. All lies. He saw his team again, their faces frozen in the moment before the explosion, the moment when everything he believed in turned to ash. Could he trust anyone, including Vega? Could he trust the Deathworlders? On the Indomitable, the science team's report grew increasingly dire. "Captain, the anomaly is expanding rapidly," the Tellarian officer reported, his voice permeated with panic. "Spatial distortions are intensifying, we're detecting temporal echoes." A guttural voice cut through the tension. "Scout Ship Stalker reports bizarre sensor readings," a Krogan comms officer announced. "Visual distortions, energy signatures, then, nothing, we've lost contact." Zhao's teeth clenched. "Deploy Containment Team Alpha," she ordered. "Equip them with the experimental phase stabilization devices. I want that anomaly contained now." In the escape pod, Robert fought to override the scrambled comm system. He needed to warn the Deathworlders, to tell them about the bioweapon, about the obsidian hand. He keyed the transmit button, his voice strained. "Deathworld Fleet. Prylorian bioweapon. Obsidian hand. Danger." The signal crackled and faded, lost in the chaotic energy field surrounding the pod. On the bridge of the Indomitable, the comms officer frowned. "Captain, we've received a fragmented transmission from the escape pod, heavily distorted. It sounds like bioweapon, Prylorian, attack." Zhao's eyes narrowed. "Bioweapon, prepare for a possible bio-attack. Scan all incoming vessels. Increase defensive shields." Near the expanding anomaly, the Deathworlder containment team deployed in heavily armored suits. They activated their phase stabilization devices, the experimental technology humming with nearly unleashed energy. But the anomaly pulsed, its energy fluctuations growing more erratic. The devices sputtered, overloaded, and died. The anomaly continued to expand, pulling in everything around it. Asteroids, debris, even the wreckage of destroyed Cathar ships. The swirling vortex grew larger, more menacing, a gaping maw in the fabric of space-time. Robert watched the expanding anomaly, a chilling realization dawning on him. The Cathar hadn't just been trying to steal the bioweapon, they'd been trying to unleash it. They'd used him, used Vega, used the entire colony as a test subject, a catalyst. He made a decision. His hand hovered over the override controls. He bypassed the automated trajectory, setting a new course, a suicidal course, straight into the heart of the anomaly. On the Indomitable, Zhao watched in disbelief as the escape pod changed direction, heading directly towards the unstable vortex. "What is he doing?" she demanded. "Intercept that pod, I want to know what he's carrying." As the escape pod hurtled towards the anomaly, Robert felt a strange sensation, a tingling in his brain. The walls of reality seemed to thin, to dissolve. He saw glimpses of other worlds, other timelines, impossible geometries, and alien landscapes. Visions flickered before his eyes, futures that might be, futures that would never be. In a hidden location, cloaked from sensors and shielded from prying eyes, figures watched the unfolding events with cold satisfaction. "The catalyst has entered the vortex," one of them said, his voice a smooth, chilling whisper. "Phase 1 is complete. The universe will soon tremble before the obsidian hand." Robert's escape pod plunged into the swirling vortex of energy and spatial distortions. The alarm screamed, the pod shuddered, and then silence. He was gone. The sensorium flickered, strobing violent amethyst and sickly green. Static clawed at Robert's eardrums, a chorus of dying frequencies. His head swam, not with the gentle lull of hyperspace, but with jagged, electric pain. The escape pod bucked violently, each shudder a fresh assault on his senses. Catherine, Michael. Faces swam before him, superimposed on the swirling chaos outside the viewport. Catherine's smile, the way Michael used to tug on his sleeve, begging for another story about space pirates. Guilt, cold and sharp, twisted in his gut. He should have been there, he could have been there. He slammed a fist against the console, the pain a welcome distraction. Focus right, he muttered, his voice strained. They're dead, you're alive, now do something useful. Despite the visual and auditory hallucinations, Robert forced his hands to move, fingers dancing across the mangled control panel. The pod's sensors were fried, spitting out gibberish. He needed to recalibrate, to filter the noise and find a signal, any signal, within this chaotic anomaly. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he rerouted power, bypassed damaged circuits, and coaxed the archaic systems back to life. Across the light years, aboard the Deathworlder flagship Dauntless, Captain Zhao watched the cascading energy readings with grim intensity. The anomaly's signature was intensifying, spreading like a malignant tumor through the sector. Containment perimeter now, she barked, her voice amplified across the bridge. Seal off sectors 4 through 9. No vessels are to enter without express authorization. The bridge crew, a motley collection of Kravath warriors, Sylph navigators, and stoic Eladrin strategists, moved with practiced efficiency. But even their combined skills were strained by the spatial distortions rippling through the area. Jump calculations went awry, navigation buoys vanished, and the very fabric of space seemed to fray at the edges. Back in the escape pod, Robert finally managed to stabilize the sensor readings. A pattern emerged from the chaos, a subtle rhythm hidden beneath the surface noise. The anomaly wasn't random, it was being controlled. He scrambled to patch together another message, his fingers flying across the makeshift keyboard. Anomaly. Controlled. External source. Beware. He transmitted the fragmented signal, praying that someone somewhere would understand. On the Dauntless, a klaxon blared, signaling the arrival of another garbled transmission. Captain Zhao frowned. Another desperate plea from a dying man, or something more. Override initial assessment, she ordered. Analyze this message for hidden meanings, subtle cues. I want to know everything this. Robert Wright is trying to tell us. Meanwhile, Robert's analysis deepened. The anomaly's energy was resonating with something, amplifying it exponentially. He cross-referenced the energy signature with the Prilorian database. Vega's bioweapon R-number arch. Number, it can't be. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The obsidian hand wasn't just trying to destroy Zeta-9. They were using the anomaly to amplify Vega's research, creating a chain reaction that could destabilize space-time itself. They wanted to rewrite reality to their liking. He had to stop it. He reached for the emergency shutdown, but the pod systems were too damaged, too corrupted by the anomaly's energy. He needed a manual override, a direct connection to the amplification matrix. On a hidden obsidian hand vessel cloaked within the anomaly's distortions, a hooded figure watched Robert's progress with cold detachment. He's becoming problematic, the figure hissed, their voice distorted by a modulator. Eliminate him. Deploy the interceptor drone. A sleek black drone detached from the vessel and streaked towards Robert's escape pod. Alarms blared as the drone unleashed a barrage of energy weapons, tearing through the pod's weakened shields. The pod shuddered violently, alarms screaming. Robert knew he was out of time. The obsidian ND was closing in. He had one chance, a desperate gamble. He ripped off his safety harness, grabbed a survival kit, and activated the emergency ejection system. The pod's hatch blew open, and he was hurled into the heart of the hyperspace anomaly, a lone figure equipped with nothing but a limited survival suit and a burning perseverance. On the Dauntless, the decryption team finally cracked Robert's message, piecing together the full extent of the Obsidian Hand's plan. "Captain," the lead analyst reported, his voice pale. "They're not just destroying Zeta-9, they're trying to rewrite reality itself." Zhao's eyes narrowed. "Prepare for a full-scale assault on the anomaly's source," she ordered, her voice ringing with commitment. "We cannot allow them to succeed, no matter the consequences." Adrift within the swirling chaos of the anomaly, Robert felt his senses fraying, his mind teetering on the edge of madness. Then a figure materialized before him, shimmering and distorted, yet undeniably Vega. "Robert," the figure said, her voice a haunting echo. "Join us. Embrace the new reality, or be erased from existence." Robert stared at the distorted image of the woman he had come to respect, the woman whose research was being twisted into a weapon of unimaginable power. He thought of Catherine, of Michael, of all those who had been lost to senseless violence. "I refuse," he said, his voice firm despite the chaos swirling around him. "I will fight for the freedom of all, even if it means sacrificing myself." He was just a man, a flawed and broken man. But in that moment, adrift in the heart of a reality-altering anomaly, Robert Wright rediscovered his humanity, his purpose. He would not let the Obsidian Hand win. He would fight. He would make a difference. Robert spun, weightless, the gyroscopic stabilizers in his suit screaming in protest. Ejection had been violent, but the aftermath was worse. He was adrift in a kaleidoscope of raw energy, the hyperspace anomaly a living storm of distorted light and sound. Every sensor in his suit blared red, warnings flashing across his visor. Hull integrity compromised. Energy fluctuations critical, reality distortion imminent. The chaotic currents buffeted him, a relentless assault on his senses. Nausea clawed at his stomach. Then she appeared. A shimmering projection of Vega, impossibly perfect, materialized before him. Her face was unmarred, her eyes filled with warmth, her voice a soothing balm against the cacophony. "Robert," she whispered, "come home. Let go of the pain, let go of the struggle." The projection intensified and the anomaly around him dissolved, replaced by a vision of Earth. Not the war-ravaged Earth he remembered, but a verdant paradise. His childhood home stood pristine, bathed in golden sunlight. His parents smiled, waving from the porch. His sister, alive and laughing, ran towards him. The temptation was almost unbearable. He could feel the pull, the promise of a life free from loss, free from the constant weight of guilt. But something felt wrong. Too perfect. Too manufactured. He squeezed his eyes shut, images flashing through his mind. The charred remains of his squad, Vega's determined face as she worked tirelessly in her lab, the desperate pleas of the Prylorian refugees. These were the real memories, the ones that mattered, the ones he was fighting for. He opened his eyes, the perfect reality fading, the chaotic anomaly returning. "It's not real," he rasped, his voice strained. "It's a lie." On the bridge of the unbreakable spirit, Captain Zhao studied the sensor data, her brow furrowed. "The anomaly's energy signature is fluctuating," she announced, her voice tight. "And it's correlating directly with the Terran's bio readings. There's a connection. A psychic link, Captain." Her first officer, a hulking Krogan named Grunt, rumbled. "Something like that," Zhao replied. "But we can use it. Modify the containment strategy. Focus the energy dampeners on his location. If we can stabilize his biosignature, we can stabilize the anomaly itself. He's the key." But the Obsidian Hand anticipated their move. Within the anomaly, the energy currents intensified, becoming even more violent. Robert's suit groaned under the strain, the warnings escalating. The projection of Vega flickered, her perfect smile twisting into a grotesque mockery. "You can't win, Robert," she hissed, her voice pain, aided with malice. "Give in. Let us erase the pain." Then a flicker. A fleeting image, a fragment of a transmission. A cold, calculating voice. "The timeline must be cleansed. The new order will be absolute." Robert stumbled, his knees going weak. He wasn't just fighting to save the Prelorians or even the galaxy. He was fighting to save reality itself. Another image, a colossal entity wreathed in shadow, its form shifting and indistinct. But he could feel its pain, its agony radiating outwards like a shockwave. It was a star being, captured and enslaved, forced to emit the distorted space-time waves that were tearing reality apart. The distorted Vega projection reappeared, her voice softer, more urgent. "Robert, please," she pleaded. "They're using me. They trapped a fragment of my consciousness. I can help you, but you have to listen." She gestured towards a barely perceptible distortion in the energy field, a shimmering anomaly within the anomaly. "There's a hidden access point, a pathway to the core. You have to reach it." Aboard the unstoppable drive, a Volus scientist frantically analyzed the anomaly's energy fluctuations. "Captain," he squeaked, his voice trembling, "I've found a pattern. The energy spikes correspond to specific historical events, the signing of the Galactic Charter, the defeat of the Xylar invasion, the Terran Renaissance." Zhao's face hardened. "They're not just erasing planets," she said grimly. "They're erasing hope, they're rewriting history." She turned to her comms officer. "Prepare a fleet-wide broadcast. I want every ship ready for full engagement." Grunt hesitated. "Captain, the risks are astronomical if we fail to contain the anomaly." "Then we fail to protect everything," Zhao interrupted, her voice firm. "We commit the full fleet, now." Within the anomaly, a new threat materialized, a being of pure energy coalescing into a humanoid form. Its eyes glowed with malevolent intent, its presence causing Robert's suit to shudder violently. "You cannot interfere," it hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that echoed in his mind. "Your consciousness will be assimilated. Your memories will be erased." Robert, guided by Vega's echo, focused on the subtle energy patterns around him, the chaotic currents swirling and shifting like a living maze. He knew he couldn't fight the construct directly, but he could use the anomaly itself as a weapon. He led the construct on a desperate chase, weaving through the treacherous energy streams, pushing his suit to its absolute limit. He remembered Vega's lectures on hyperspace physics, the way the anomaly responded to specific energy signatures. He channeled his focus, manipulating the currents, creating a spatial trap. The construct, consumed by its desire to assimilate him, plunged headlong into the trap. The energy field shimmered, then collapsed, engulfing the construct in a vortex of raw power. Meanwhile, the Deathworlder fleet breached the anomaly's outer defenses, a wave of explosions rippling across the distorted landscape. The Obsidian Hand's forces met them with fierce resistance, energy blasts lancing through space, ships colliding in a chaotic ballet of destruction. Zhao, aboard the unyielding Determination, watched the battle unfold, her face grim. "We need to create an opening," she said, her voice tight. "A diversion. Focus all fire on Sector Gamma 9, draw their forces away from the core." It was a gamble, a costly one, but it was the only way to give Robert a chance. Robert reached the core of the anomaly, a swirling vortex of unimaginable power. In the center he saw it, the captive star being, a colossal entity writhing in agony, its light dimmed, its power twisted. Then a holographic projection appeared before him, a figure cloaked in shadow, its face obscured, its voice smooth and seductive. "Impressive, Robert Wright," it said. "You have overcome many obstacles, but your journey ends here. Join us. Embrace the new reality. In our world you will have power beyond your wildest dreams. You will shape the universe in your image." Robert stared at the projection, his heart pounding, his mind racing. He could feel the pull of the offer, the seductive promise of control, but he knew what it would cost: his freedom, his humanity. He clenched his fist, his gaze hardening. "I refuse," he said, his voice ringing with defiance. "I will not be a part of your twisted game. I fight for the free galaxy, and I will find a way to stop you." He remembered Vega's bioweapon research, the original purpose to heal, not harm. He realized it held the key. Despite insurmountable odds, Robert prepared to restore the original plan. True freedom, Robert spat, the metallic tang of blood filling his mouth, isn't some sterile, controlled environment you puppet masters enforce. It's the messy, unpredictable, beautiful reality we fight for, flaws and all. The Obsidian Hand leader's holographic projection flickered, his eyes burning with icy contempt. Sentimentality, a weakness you humans cling to, a weakness I will excise. A wave of violet energy erupted from the leader, lancing towards Robert, the air crackling with suppressed power. Before the energy could engulf him, a shimmering, translucent form flickered into existence before Robert Vega's echo. The violet blast washed over her, causing her form to waver, revealing a fleeting image, a memory. Schematics overlaid on a Prylorian child's drawing of a star. A secondary system hidden within the bioweapon research. Robert, Vega's voice though faint was clear, the energy, it resonates, the star being, its natural state, frequency 7-3 disrupt their control. Robert, despite the chaos swirling around him, focused. Comms frequencies, anomaly energy patterns. They were all interconnected. 7-3, got it. He accessed the makeshift console, his fingers flying across the keys, rerouting the energy conduits. Time to sing a new song. His fingers slammed onto the final key. A counter frequency, raw and untamed, pulsed outwards, resonating with the star being's chaotic energy. A low, guttural moan echoed through the fractured space-time, the star being's agony momentarily subsiding. The chaotic energy around it began to shift, responding to Robert's signal, like iron filings aligning to a magnet. A surge of pure, white energy erupted from the star being, ripping through the anomaly structure. Jagged tears appeared in the distorted reality, forming fleeting pockets of stable space-time. All Deathworlder vessels, a voice crackled over the comms, Captain Eva Rostova of the Ursine battlecruiser Ironclaw, exploit the breaches. Engage the enemy. Through the newly formed rifts, the Deathworlder fleet surged forward, a patchwork armada of ships, each a testament to its species' unique approach to warfare. A hulking Krogan dreadnought unleashed a barrage of kinetic rounds, while a sleek Asari cruiser weaved through the chaos, its energy weapons carving paths through the Obsidian Hand's constructs. Zhao to all boarding parties, Captain Zhao's voice, calm amidst the storm, breach and secure. No quarter. On one of the larger Obsidian Hand constructs, a boarding party led by Captain Zhao, a towering figure clad in crimson Terran Alliance armor, stormed through a breach. Elite Obsidian Hand warriors, their eyes glowing with violet energy, met them head-on. The air filled with the crackle of energy weapons and the clang of melee combat. Krogans roared, Ursines howled, and humans fought with a relentless drive born of countless battles. The Obsidian Hand leader, observing the unfolding chaos, turned his attention back to Robert, his holographic form shimmering with scarcely controlled rage. "You meddling insect, you will not interfere." He raised his hand, preparing to unleash another blast of corrupting energy. Vega's echo, flickering and fading, surged forward, channeling her remaining energy into Robert's signal. The counter-frequency intensified, weakening the Obsidian Hand leader's control and strengthening the star being's resistance. The star being, fueled by the resonating frequency and Vega's sacrifice, unleashed a blinding flash of pure light. The Obsidian Hand's control matrix, the focal point of their influence, shattered into a million pieces, its violet energy dissipating like smoke. The anomaly shuddered violently. On the captured construct, Zhao's boarding party reached the core. They found a chamber filled with rows of Prylorian scientists, their faces gaunt and hollow, wired into a complex network of bio-organic technology, forced to amplify the bioweapon signal. Robert, witnessing the scientists' plight through the comms feed, felt a surge of cold fury. He remembered Vega's research, her desperate attempts to understand the bioweapon's underlying principles. The frequency. It can be inverted. He accessed Vega's research notes, his fingers dancing across the console, modifying the counter frequency. This isn't just about freeing the star being, he muttered. It's about stopping them everywhere. He created a new signal, one designed to disrupt the Obsidian Hand's control network across the entire galaxy. He transmitted the modified signal. Across the galaxy, Obsidian Hand constructs flickered and died. Influenced agents faltered, their eyes losing their violet glow. The tide was turning. The star being, now free from the Obsidian Hand's control, began to pulse with a calming blue light. The disrupted space-time around it slowly began to stabilize, the jagged tears mending themselves. The Obsidian Hand leader, weakened but not defeated, his holographic projection flickering erratically, attempted to flee. "This is not over, human. You will pay for this. The Obsidian Hand will have its revenge." Robert intercepted him, blocking his escape route. "Nowhere to run," Robert said, his voice hard, his eyes narrowed. "This ends here." The Obsidian Hand leader lunged, but Robert was ready. He dodged the attack, his movements fluid and precise, drawing upon his years of training. He used his knowledge of the anomaly's shifting energy fields to his advantage, predicting the leader's movements and countering his attacks. He disabled the holographic projection with a well-aimed pulse of energy, severing the connection. The Obsidian Hand leader's essence dissolved into the restored space-time, his final expression a silent scream as his holographic projection winked out of existence. The star being, free from its prison, unfurled like a cosmic bloom. A harmonic pulse, shimmering with all the colors of creation, erupted from its core. It washed over Zeta 9, then expanded outwards, engulfing the galaxy. On comm stations across 1,000 worlds, the insidious hum of the bioweapon signal vanished, replaced by pure, resonant silence. Zeta 9, scarred but not broken, began to heal. Prylorians, their faces etched with relief, emerged from bunkers and shelters. Deathworlder engineers, some towering and reptilian, others small and furry, worked side by side with Prylorian technicians, repairing damaged infrastructure with practiced efficiency. Homes were rebuilt, fields replanted, life returning to the colony. In a makeshift lab, Robert and Vega hunched over a holographic display, their faces illuminated by the flickering light. "Almost there," Vega murmured, her fingers flying across the controls. "Just need to integrate the Deathworlder sensor net with our long-range scanners." Robert nodded, his gaze fixed on the complex schematics. "This will give us a light year's warning, no more surprises." He glanced at Vega, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Not if we can help it." Across the galaxy, the Deathworlder fleet moved with relentless efficiency. A Krogan demolition team detonated the last of the Obsidian Hand's hidden weapon caches on a desolate moon. An Asari commando unit liberated a slave camp on a jungle planet, their biotics tearing through the guards with ease. A Tyrian warship bombarded a hidden research facility from orbit, reducing it to molten slag. Justice was swift and absolute. Holographic messages flooded the Deathworlder command channels. A grateful Volus ambassador, his translator squeaking with emotion. A stoic Elker chieftain, his voice a rumbling bass. A chorus of voices, united in gratitude. "The galaxy owes you a debt it can never repay. You have given us hope where there was only despair. We will never forget what you have done." Back on Zeta 9, a Terran Alliance ensign approached Robert holding a datapad. "Commander Wright, the Alliance has awarded you the Star Cross for your exceptional service." Robert waved his hand dismissively. "Give it to Vega, and the Deathworlders, they're the ones who saved the day." He clapped the ensign on the shoulder. "Just doing my job." That evening, Robert and Vega stood on a hill overlooking the restored colony, the twin moons of Zeta 9 casting long shadows. "It's beautiful," Robert said softly, his voice barely a whisper. Vega nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. We did it, together. A long silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken emotions. Thank you, Robert, Vega finally said, turning to face him. For everything. In a classroom overlooking the spaceport, Vega addressed a group of young Prylorian engineers. Commander Wright showed us that even the most advanced technology is useless without courage and compassion. That's why we're calling this program the Wright Initiative. The students nodded, their faces filled with dedication. Robert stood on the bridge of the Deathworlder flagship, the unbowed spirit, his gaze fixed on the swirling nebula ahead. They were right, he thought. I wasn't meant to die alone in a bar. I was meant for this. He turned to Captain Zhao. Ready to answer the next call, Captain. Zhao grinned, her mandibles clicking with anticipation. Always, Commander. Robert worked late into the night, surrounded by holographic schematics and alien datapads. He was designing a new communication protocol, one that incorporated the star being's harmonic frequency. A system that could detect and neutralize any energy-based bioweapon before it could even be deployed. A shield for the galaxy, forged in the fires of Zeta-9. The Deathworlder fleet, a kaleidoscope of alien warships, warped into hyperspace, leaving Zeta-9 behind. Their reputation, once feared, was now legendary. They were the unstoppable protectors, the guardians of the weak, the answer to every desperate plea. Robert closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and opened a private comm channel. Sarah, Emily, it's me, Dad. His voice cracked with emotion. I know you can't hear me, but I wanted you to know. I'm not giving up. I'm fighting for you, for everyone. A single tear rolled down his cheek. I'll make you proud. Vega watched the Deathworlder fleet disappear into the swirling void, her heart filled with a complex mix of emotions. Hope, gratitude, and something else. A budding love for the quiet, determined human who had saved her world. She knew with absolute certainty that the galaxy was safer because of him. A young Prylorian child tugged at Vega's sleeve. Auntie Vega, what are the Deathworlders? Vega smiled, kneeling down to meet the child's gaze. They are the galaxy's protectors, little one, always ready to answer the call for help. Always ready to fight for those who can't fight for themselves. The final shot, the Deathworlder fleet, a beacon of hope against the darkness, warping through hyperspace, answering distress calls across the galaxy.